Welcome to the first in a 3-part video series about design thinking. Now, design thinking seems to be one of these buzzwords that a lot of people in a lot of organizations are talking about. But there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is, why you should use it, who should use it, whether it's a process, a methodology, a mindset, all of these things. So in this 3-part series, I'm going to be talking about what it is and why you should use it. And then in part 2, I'll be talking about the tools and techniques that you can use in order to solve better problems and solve problems in a better way. And then in part 3, I'm going to be focusing on the mindset. So let's get started with what design thinking is and what it isn't. Now, I've been using design thinking as a process and as a methodology for probably about 10 years. I started using it in schools, would you believe, not anything to do with the digital world, which is what we often think about when we think about design thinking. And back then it was kind of new, very new in the world of education, but I started to apply a lot of these principles to my teaching in order to kind of be able to deliver better teaching practice and get people to learn even better than they were before. But I've been focusing really heavily on it around product and digital product design for probably the last 6 or 7 years. And what I want to do is talk about these 3 things. Now, I'm breaking this video up into 3 parts. The first part is all about understanding and defining what design thinking is and who should use it. The second phase, as I talked about, the second part of the video, is going to be all about the tools, and then the third, all about the mindset. So let's get into understanding and defining what design thinking really is. Now, when I did some searching, because although I've been practicing design thinking for a long time, it's always good to go and Google and see what other people are saying. Now, when I Googled it, I found this quote. Design thinking is a design methodology that provides a solution-based approach to solving problems. It's extremely useful in tackling complex problems that are ill-defined and unknown by understanding the human needs involved, by reframing the problem in a human-centric ways, by creating many ideas in brainstorming sessions, and by adopting a hands-on approach in prototyping and testing. What an absolute mouthful that is. It's no wonder when this is the definition that you see that people kind of get confused. Now, it's useful and it's true and it's accurate to a large extent, but it's not the whole truth. If we just look at this to start with, this, and take out the words that are kind of extraneous, that aren't needed, then we get to this point, and this is literally just taking out these words out of this definition. You get to a point where it says, design thinking is a methodology for solving complex problems by understanding human needs, reframing the problem, making ideas through prototyping and testing them. Super simple. There's this process, but it's all about solving complex problems. It's not necessarily about designing in the kind of conventional sense of the word design. It's not about pixels. It's not about graphic design. It's not about beautiful artwork. It's about solving problems. And that's one of the big points that we need to underscore, triple underline, because that is such an important factor. It's about problem solving, not about designing digital stuff, artwork, etc. When we Google or when we look at what design thinking is, you get all these different words appearing. You get that it's a methodology, that it's an approach, that it's a framework, that it's an ideology sometimes, that it's a process, a mindset, and probably to some extent all of these are true. But I like to think about design thinking in 2 ways. And simply put, it's a methodology and at the same time, it's a mindset. Now, a methodology is a system of methods, a system of tools that are put together to form some kind of process and some kind of way of doing something. So don't worry too much about the methodology and what exactly that means. Of course, mindset is all about how we think. It's our frame of mind. It's the natural way that we do things. And mindset is, again, a huge topic in organizations at the moment. A lot of people talking about how to change people's mindsets to be more agile and all those kind of things. And I think there's a load of videos that I'd love to do around what mindset really is as well, and kind of cut through all of the nonsense that we often hear. But methodology and mindset. Methodology is kind of the process again, the system, the tools. The mindset is about getting this habit, getting into the practice of doing these things. And that's a really, really important place to get to as well. Now, thinking about the methodology or the process, if you were to Google design thinking, you would generally always find a picture of 4 circles in a line that say something like this, that say empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And this diagram, usually with different colors, is the one that everybody sees. And so it's really straightforward. Our kind of natural tendency is to think that all design thinking is these 5 stages. And if we go through linearly through these 5 stages, then that's really it. And that kind of makes sense. And these are pretty straightforward. If we want to solve problems, then we probably need to do these things. Now, let's think about each of these very quickly, just to highlight what they are and what they're trying to say here. Now, empathize is all about, of course, empathizing with our end users, our customers, the people that we want to serve. There's a really good phrase that is often used around UX designers and people that are kind of solving problems and designing things, and that is, you are not your user. And that mantra is really important because you've got to remember that the people that you're trying to serve might have different perspectives, different opinions. They might be coming from different backgrounds. They might have very different experiences that are going to shape the way that they think and the way that they do things. And so empathy is all about stepping into the shoes of the people that you're trying to serve in order to properly understand what their pain points are, what the jobs are that they're trying to get done, the work that they're trying to get done, what they're looking to achieve in their life or in their kind of with the problems that they're currently facing. Empathy is often broken up into 2 areas as well, which is to observe and to understand. When we're observing people out in the wild, we're trying to get an understanding of how they act, how they behave, how they talk, what their feelings are, their emotions. And then we try to understand what that is, what that actually really means in an insightful way that helps us go on to this next stage, which is to define. Now, the define stage is about defining the problem. Remember, we're nowhere near getting to a solution yet. This is all about defining the problem that we see before us. Now, the vast majority of businesses that actually fail because they weren't addressing a real need that people actually had. Sometimes we have this perceived need. We have this idea that we think is a problem big enough to warrant a solution, but sometimes the problem isn't big enough and the solution that you create isn't worth the money that you're asking for. So the problem can't be big enough to be solved. Now, we can see problems all over the place, but unless we get that problem right, our product, our new process, our new service that we're creating, it's just never going to work. So in order to mitigate that risk, getting the right definition is really, really important. And I'm going to come back to why we want to do this in a few minutes, but understanding the problem first, really intricately, really in detail, is so, so important. Now, once we've identified this problem, we've got some kind of problem statement that tells us exactly what's going on and what the problems are that these people are facing, then we go into ideation phase. And there's loads of ways that we can ideate. But at this stage, we're trying to come up with as many different ideas as we possibly can, as many out there and obscure and crazy ideas at times, because some of those crazy ideas actually turn into the really good ones. If it's obvious, then it might have been done, or it might not work. But some of the crazy ideas are the ones that can really work. And actually thinking of some of those crazy ideas means that you can work backwards into something that would really, really work and isn't so crazy. Ideation is all about lots and lots of ideas. Now, the prototype phase is basically making that idea tangible, some kind of tangible form. Now, prototypes can take lots of different forms, and we can talk about all these different types of forms in a few minutes. But a prototype is about that tangibility of the idea. Now, I like to think of this expression, which is if a picture paints 1,000 words, a prototype paints 1,000 pictures. Now, what that doesn't mean is that you should only prototype one thing, because different people interpret different prototypes, different pictures in different ways. What we need to do is make sure that we're still keeping our eyes and ears open, try to understand what this prototype is doing and is capable of doing. We must not fall in love with the solution. We're still in the exploration phase at this point. Even though we're building a prototype, it's not, never think about it as a version 1 of your final product. This is all about testing and learning and understanding that problem even more to really understand whether it exists. Now, that leads us on nicely to stage 5, which is testing. A prototype is of no real use if you don't use it to test some assumptions. Every single thing that we've done to this step is an assumption. It's a hypothesis. A hypothesis is really an assumption that can be proven out, that can be tested, and we can validate or invalidate, of course. And sometimes what happens is that we figure out that the idea that we had or the problem that we thought existed doesn't exist. And that is a brilliant point to get to, because if you do this really quickly and prove that the thing that you might have spent a huge amount of money on isn't going to work, then you've saved yourself a huge amount of work and time and money, and you can use that in order to explore other ideas and different problems. So really is an amazing process to follow. The importance of stage 5 cannot be underestimated. Experimentation is probably the thing that underpins the whole of design thinking and is central to every single thing that you should do as someone who practices design thinking. Now, very quickly, I want to talk about what design thinking isn't as well. Now, design thinking isn't just about pixels. One of the questions that I get asked all the time, and I did a video about this, I'll pop this up here somewhere, never remember whether it's this way or this way. It isn't about pixels, and it's not just for designers. It's not about graphic design. It's not about just about visual interpretation. It's not about digital design only. It can be used across anything. As I said, I've used it in learning and education. I've used it to create services. I used it to design and build this office, would you believe, back in the lockdown in 2020. So it's not just about pixels. It's not just about graphic design, and it's not just for designers. So that is absolutely not. Lean. It is also not lean. Now, Lean, the Lean Startup, the book by Eric Ries, and the whole methodology and approach that's taken over the startup world since its release about 10 years ago. Design thinking is different to that. I did a video about the differences between design thinking, Lean, and this other one, which is Agile. And there are differences between each of these. Design thinking is not lean, it is not agile, but actually the three of them can work really well together. You would tend to use each of these methodologies and approaches, mindsets at different times, depending on whether you're exploring a problem, whether you're testing an MVP, or whether you're in production mode and want to scale the production and scale the rollout of your new software or service or new product. And so design thinking can't be confused with these things. It's not a synonym. It's not something which you can just say, well, we do lean, so we don't do design thinking. We do agile, we don't do design thinking. These things can work together, and they're used for different purposes at different points in the production life cycle or in the innovation life cycle, if you like, of your journey. Now, what I did say as well is that we're going to talk about why you should use it and who should use it. Now, the reasons why design thinking I think are so important and so important for all organizations to be using is because you can test ideas way quicker doing these processes than you would otherwise test. You can get to results and learning much, much quicker. Now, the key part and the key thing to remember with design thinking is this is about learning, not about the end product. Your experimentations, your tests should be testing the learning that you've gathered along the way. So when should you use design thinking? You should use it whenever you've got a complex problem to solve. The definition is about complex problem solving. Now, it could be that your problem isn't that big and you only need to go through one of these cycles of design thinking cycles. But it might be that you've got a really big problem. You need to go through this 10 or 20 or 30, 40 times. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video, all about the tools. But finally, the question about who. Now, we've already said that design thinking is not just for designers. Now, here's what I passionately believe is that design thinking, the approach, the mindset, the tools, even if you're not using them every single stage all of the time, anybody, and I mean anybody, can and probably should be using some aspects of design thinking. It might be that you use it in your personal life. It might be that you use it in your professional life. It might be have nothing to do with a digital product. It might be nothing to do with something that you're actually going to sell. You can use these same approaches and same principles for creating content, for education, for creating a new service, a coaching course, anything that you do in an organization across any team, you can actually apply these same principles and same techniques. They're super transferable. And that's something that I do a huge amount, is use these same techniques for strategy, for marketing campaigns, all those kind of things within organizations as well. Now, that is the end of this first part. I'm going to be carrying on tomorrow. I'm going to release part 2. If you're watching this some other time, I'll put a link in to make sure that you can get straight to part 2 as well. But for now, that's all about why we use design thinking, defining it, understanding what it is, and who should be using design thinking. I hope that that's been useful, helpful for you. If you've got some value from it, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be doing lots more of these videos, not just this 3-part series on design thinking. I've got loads more content planned about agile, about lean, about product thinking, about innovation and business more generally as well. So please do like it, do subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.